So for those that don't know me, I'm managing partner at Insight 222, which is a firm that works with organizations, around 70 organizations around the world, and helps them put people analytics at the center of their business. And we also provide digital learning through the MyHR Future platform for people analytics teams, but also the wider HR to help them get more data literate, data driven, etc. Firstly, to say really, COVID-19 is a personal and a professional challenge for all of us. So firstly, my thoughts go out to everyone on this call, your families, your friends and your teams at this difficult time. It is a unique situation. I've never worked from home for as many consecutive days. My wife, who always complains about me being away, is now sick of the sight of me. So I'm hoping we get through this crisis soon. One of the things I do is curate. So I've sought kind of personal solace through this crisis in compiling a list of what I hope are helpful resources for the community on COVID-19. And I'm updating that article once a week on LinkedIn and via MyHR Future. Please do send me details of my emails down there of any articles you think that I haven't included, which I should, particularly those related to people analytics and employee experience. And what we're going to walk through now is a flash through 10 of the best of the web, or at least the best of the web for me, and hopefully they should have resonance for the people on the call today. So first thing to say really is one of the big features of this crisis for me is that it's really brought data science and storytelling to the fore. I've been watching the daily briefings in the UK where the government, politicians and scientists are coming together to deliver a story, a compelling story as well, as they walk us through the daily updates of what's happening with this situation, which is changing all the time. On the last forum 2 weeks ago, I think Jeremy Shapiro highlighted Andrew Cuomo, and it was right to do so. I think he's become the epitome of data-driven storytelling in the crisis. His riposte to Mr. Trump was particularly telling, and I think the words that are up on the screen there is a quote that we should try and be replicating within all our organizations, both now, but also beyond the current crisis as well. And I think there's always stuff that we can learn from the external world and bring it into our community. I'm going to start with an article many of you have read, and I know, Paul, you touched on it a little bit in the last on the last call, but I think it's worth highlighting for those that haven't read it already the key takeaways from it. The main thrust of the article is that it likens the role of the chief people officer in this crisis to that of the CFO in the global financial crisis. It gives examples of a number of CHROs, including my old one when I was at IBM, Diane Gerson and Beth Galetti at Amazon, and how they're helping their organizations through the crisis. And I think critically for our field, it highlights how each company is using people analytics. It highlights that those companies, those three companies, that the investment they've made in people analytics and the capabilities they've developed are really helping them lead the way in their organizations in their response. And I think the quote up there is an important narrative for our field. I've spoken to a lot of people analytics leaders in the last few weeks, and the consistent messages I hear is, number one, you've never been so busy. Number two, your work has never been consistently elevated as high as it is in the organization at the moment. And the work you're doing is actually saving lives. It couldn't be more important than that. And one of the bittersweet features of the crisis is that people analytics has become even more important, which I think is good for all of us. One people analytics leader I spoke to, he summarized it as people, and I take the direct quote, people analytics is truly more impactful than ever in the current crisis. It's gone from being a strategic differentiator that the best CHROs demand to an absolute essential to manage our way through the crisis. And I think it sets us up well for when we finally get over this thing. So last time Josh was on speaking about his big reset article, he's been publishing a lot of stuff during the crisis, and I think we all have to acknowledge the leadership that he's displaying is being immense and really helping our community. This highlights the 10 lessons that emerged from a webinar he facilitated with HR leaders from the likes of IBM and Novartis and United Health Group. And I think it reinforces the review from the Economist article that HR is really leading the response to this crisis in their organizations. I think we could take each of those 10 lessons and we could see that there's a people analytics and employee experience angle to it. And I'm sure that the panel that follows this is going to feature certainly the first four. Couple of insights, really. The importance of real-time data. Diane Gerson talked a lot about that on Josh's webinar. And certainly my experience at IBM was this was a nice combination of active listening tools and passive. And about the going digital, that meme that you stuck up, Paul, was perfect. Novartis were on the call and they talked about their 2-year rollout of Microsoft Teams became a 2-week rollout thanks to this crisis. So again, an example of digital really is being elevated. Other leadership here, so there's 4 kind of articles that really talk about HR's role and the employee experience part of it here. So again, like Josh, Dave Ulrich's leadership and content has been immense throughout the crisis. And this quote, I think, is something that we should all be mindful of as we do our work. Amy Edmondson, who many of you all know, her work was some of the main basis of the research that Google's people analytics team used at the basis for its Project Aristotle study into what makes an effective team. And Amy's done a great article, I think it's on HBR as well, talking about the importance of transparency in this crisis. You know, you need to be clear on what you know and what you don't know with people. You need to encourage people to speak up. And if you don't get them to speak up, you don't have data. And if you don't have data, you don't know what's working, what's not working, and what you need to do. And the importance of transparency will not happen with psychological safety. People will not speak up if they don't think, A, they're going to be listened to, and B, there isn't any repercussions. And again, I think that could be some good themes for the panel a bit later. A couple other ones about employee experience. Anna Tavis, really good article here where she focuses on how employee experience during the crisis. If you focus on that, you're more likely to recover quicker. And Laura, who is on the panel, published a really good article last week about the importance of continuous listening in this time of crisis. And really focus that we need to, instead focusing on engagement, we need to focus on well-being. But I'm not going to steal your thunder, Laura. I'm sure you'll be able to talk about this a little bit later as well. We're currently in the middle of the largest remote working experiment in history. And one suspects that in this regard, things will never get back to normal. You know, I know several people analytics teams now, and I think you touched on this last week with the work that Dan George was doing. They're working on initiatives to understand implications of this in terms of connectedness, collaboration, productivity, wellness and burnout, etc. And using active tools like surveys, but also passive data sources such as network analysis and metadata to understand this. So this is an article that Philip Arkle of Worklytics has published, which is really interesting. It pulls together data from their customers' productivity tools. So that's Office, that's Slack, and other tools like G Suite. And it demonstrates some of the impacts of remote working on their workforces. So again, I'm just going to read some of the stuff that Philip put on there in the article. There's a lot more meetings, and I can certainly reflect in that. Many more small meetings, more one-to-one conversations that maybe would have taken place as informal chats before. More interruptions from tools like email and Slack. Longer working hours by 10 to 20% on average. More after hours email as we cross the lines between work and personal life. A lot more collaboration, but more isolated individuals. And more interaction from managers as they need to check in more often to stay up to date. These are big things for people analytics teams to be actually investigating, understanding what the impact of this could be. It sounds like we're all working harder, we're all collaborating more, and the risk of burnout on that is interesting. Just my view, but I think some of the barriers that have prevented organizations from doing passive network analytics are starting to come down as the benefits become obvious, not just to executives and managers, but to workers as well. And it'll be interesting to see if that happens as we come out of the crisis. Been a lot of talk on the last 2 forums around layoffs. And I know that there's something that Al Adamson and Jason Averbrook spoke about, particularly in their sessions on those calls. It's a difficult topic. It's one that undoubtedly people analytics seem to be asked to contribute to, even if they can't talk about it openly. You know, and some layoffs are probably sadly inevitable in most of our companies. But I think what we can do as people analytics professionals is we try and ensure that the data and the evidence are taken into account when these decisions are made. And there was a study I think someone referred to in the last call, which is the one on the left, written a couple of years ago. And it really looked at the layoffs in the global financial crisis. And I think there's a lot of learnings from there, particularly the quote I've taken there around the impact on the productivity of the survivors that weren't laid off. And there's another article article that's been published there that talks about the importance of treating this in a compassionate way. And if you can, you know, let's think outside the box as leaders, and let's help our leaders to do that. Let's involve employees in some of these conversations as well. And let's just be open and transparent all the way through. One positive story I came across is a people analytics team in the retail space. They previously done some analysis to understand what their most successful retail stores were. And they found that one of the most important factors was time to productivity of new staff that they were hiring. So they've used this study and the study on the left, the research on the left from the Harvard Business Review from Sandra and Charlene, to actually prevent their organization making layoffs. So in this respect, this work that this people analytics team has helped to save jobs. And the last article I'm going to look at here is kind of looking at the future. So it's a little bit talking about some of the stuff that Josh was talking around on the big reset, that meme that you shared, Paul, and the accelerated rollout of teams at Novartis. So Heather McGowan, who's a futurist really, she's explored the idea that the pandemic will, and indeed already is, accelerating the future of work, which potentially has many positive elements for us in the people analytics space and those of us that are working specifically around workforce experience. The argument that she portrays in the article isn't only powerful, but she talks about how we can reconfigure work and leadership around people and use culture as the North Star. So I think that really resonates. And again, it might provide an interesting talking point for the panels that follow. So other than that, thank you, Paul. Thank you, Visier, again for inviting me. I hope this has been helpful. I've tried to prevent this slide here because you've probably seen all those links and people trying to write them down. So this is the articles. Those are the links on LinkedIn and My HR Future. So thank you.